All right, I want to go through the fix that we have for um, the issue we had during the workshop. It's really fairly simple fix, but I think I also can explain some things a little bit more about Betaflight and the rxrange command we were using and explain like how that works. So I got a brand new radio out of the box, so I can make sure it's working. Got my drone hooked up to Betaflight here, and I'm going to go into the receiver mode, receiver tab, and take a look here at what's going on. So first I'm going to turn my radio on. There we go. Very good. And then if you haven't already, I know people are kind of messing around with the trim buttons, which are these things here beside the stick gimbals. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that those are zeroed out. That little chirp is the 0. So I just want to check all those. Make sure they're all zeroed out, and they should be all zeroed out now. Last thing, I want to talk a little bit more about the switches on the radio, on this DXE radio, which is the one we're using for the workshop. The DXE radio is a real nice radio. It doesn't have quite as many programming features as you can. You can program this, by the way. I didn't mention it in the workshop, but you can program this with a programming cable that goes in the back. You can buy that from the Spectrum and program it. You can also do it with your phone, with a Bluetooth cable that goes in the back. It's a little extra cost, but if you wanted to get in and do a little more tweaking on the radio, you could do that. Now, what I want to talk through is the switches themselves. So the very top here on, which would be your right side, is the arm disarm. That's your motor and throttle control. So when that's off, you have no throttle. So you see I move my stick and nothing's happening on the throttle. I've got all the rest of the gimbals channels work, but the throttle doesn't have anything at all. So when I flip it to arm, now my throttle's live and I can throttle up. So you can't run your drone if that's on disarm, so make sure that's on arm. There's basically 2 arm switches. The other one is going to be your flap, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But when you turn on the radio, you basically want all your switches in position 0, except this one over here that's the rate would be on high. So basically all the front switches are up. Your flight mode on top is on 0, and then your throttle is on arm. So basically, if you just take all your switches and go up and back, you should be set to turn on the radio. So when you turn on the radio, you see here I'm in my receiver tab on Betaflight. When I move my throttle stick up and down, here you can see that. So when I move that throttle up, you'll see my top end is 1152 or so. My bottom end is 1156. So I have 1852 and 1156. So that's my high and low. Those should be 1000 and 2000. So that's our problem here, is we should be 1000 to 2000, and we're not. So what's happening is the signal coming out of this radio is going into my flight controller, and the flight controller is seeing, when the stick is down, it's seeing 1156. When the stick is up, it's seeing 1852 or so. Okay, depending on how hard I push on that stick. So what we need to do is we need to use our rxrange to adjust those. And I think during the workshop I mentioned to somebody to try to change the rxrange for 0. And that was the error I made. Is I was thinking that the throttle was 0, but it's not. It's actually reversed from what I was thinking. It's actually going in order down the page here. And so the roll is 0, pitch is 1, yaw is 2, throttle is 3. So the rxrange we need to change is 3. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to tell the flight controller, okay, when you see 1156, that's the bottom. So make that 1000. And when you see 1852, that's the top end of that radio, make that 2000. And that will then give you the full range that we need, the full range we need to fly. So let's go into the command line interface, and let's just type in rxrange, just to see. And I reset all mine to the default for the board, and I recommend that this is good troubleshooting practice. When your students are working through these processes, go set everything back up the way it was, and just change one thing instead of changing a bunch of things. That's how how I kind of figured out the error. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the RX range then. For port 3, I'm going to change it from 1156, oh sorry, typed that wrong, 1156 and 1852. So that was the ranges that my radio was putting out. So I'm going to tell the flight controller, okay, this is the RX range. This is the range my radio has. On channel 3, the RX, the receiver range, will be 1156 is the low, 1852 is the high. And that will then allow the flight controller to scale that out to the proper reading. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return and just type in RX range just to make sure it's correct now. All right, so we're good. All the rest of them are 1,000, 2,000. You might need to change those two or might want to change those two. You won't have to right off the bat, but you could. Now you'll know a little bit more about how it works. You might be able to make that adjustment. So let's go ahead and type save. That'll save. That'll reboot. I'll reconnect. Hopefully, see if it connects here on its own. It's thinking about it. All right, let me go ahead and connect. There we go. We're all set. So now if I go into receiver, you'll see right away that there's change. My throttle is down, and it's not 1156 anymore. It's now 1,000. When I go up, it's not 1852 anymore. It's 2,000. So now I have my full range. So you can see what that did. It scaled that throttle to go full range on Betaflight, which is what I want. So now when I go up, I should have a 2,000, and when I go down, I should have a 1,000. One more thing you want to change that we neglected to cover was we need to add one more mode in here. And there's a whole bunch of modes. So you can kind of play around and see what some of those do. There's an air mode you might want to mess with. We don't really have any camera controls on ours. But certainly this is one you want to add in for sure. And this is called the horizon mode. In horizon mode, the drone will self-level. Okay, so if you're flying and you hit the stick and you go this way, when you let off the stick, it'll level itself back out. When you go forward and you let off the stick, it'll level itself back out. We want that set. Now, what I did on my radio is I am using the flight mode, which happens to be aux1. It's up here at the top. And you'll see when I flip that switch, that little indicator will move forward and backward. So we can see that when I'm in flight mode 0, you can see that in the camera or not, flight mode 0, it's in the orange, and I move those little indicators, those little sliders, so that it would be in the orange. And when it's in the middle, it's going to be outside the range, so I'm not going to have horizon mode. And you can experiment with this. I like to default to horizon mode. I think it's a lot easier to learn how to fly when you're in horizon mode. So I would recommend just setting it up like it's here on the screen. aux1, set your sliders to the upper third of the range, and then when you turn your radio on with all the switches up and back, you'll be all set. Last thing to cover is the arm. I think some people missed this in the tutorial. This should be set to aux3. I did highlight that in the tutorial now, and I added in this horizon piece too to the tutorial online, so if you want to check that out, that might be helpful. But aux3 then is the flap, and that is what will actually arm your drone. So when I flip it to the middle, it'll arm the drone. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here and get my drone ready and give it a go. So now I've got my drone here on the floor. I've got my radio, and again, all my switches are up and back, and all I have to do to arm is just flip this little flap to the middle, and you'll see when I do that, my blue light comes on. Now, one thing you'll find is sometimes your throttle stick is not all the way down, and when I arm with it all the way down, you'll see that blue light. I don't know if you can see it there on the screen, but it'll kind of flash, let you know that it's saying something's not right. Another thing that happens occasionally is you'll have the drone kind of sitting sideways. It won't be level. It must be level to arm as well. So we'll go ahead and arm it. When it goes solid blue, we know we're armed. And now I've got great lift. It's really punchy, not a problem at all. I can fly up and down without any trouble. Look at these split. So I think that'll fix the issue for you. Give it a shot. If you have any problems, let me know. And hopefully you'll have your drones up in the air no time at all.